Dorothy stared out the window, forgetting about the potatoes in the pan. Only after a couple of minutes, when the smell of burning finally got to her nose, she woke up. She groaned and turned sharply, but she accidentally touched the handle and the frying pan crashed to the floor. Watching as half of the uncooked potatoes scattered in all directions, Dorothy muttered, "What a day it is! Everything falls out of my hands." However, she said this without much surprise or anger, because she had always been quite clumsy ever since she was a child, and her not-so-slim figure now barely fit in the smallness of the kitchen. Almost every day, Dorothy dropped or spilled something while cooking. Her absent-mindedness caused many problems, not only in the kitchen, but also in life. But Dorothy was not discouraged or sad. She managed to find only pluses in everything. Yes, her kitchen was always a mess, but she invented another recipe for cake cream. Yes, the soup was too salty, but she calculated the ingredients for her next culinary masterpiece, almond cake. The only thing she was great at was desserts. Rolls, cakes, pies, muffins, pies, puffs. She was an impeccable master at that, and her bakery was very popular for so many years. It was a small bakery, but very cosy and modern, and thanks to this bakery, she and her husband Bill did not need anything. Dorothy grew dark as she remembered her husband. He had not worked anywhere for many years. Bill got up late every day, then went outside to look for inspiration. He looked for it everywhere, in the park, in the cafes, at the movies, at the market, in the malls, and then he would come and try to put new ideas into his paintings, but nothing worked. He painted and threw them away, painted again and threw them away again, and it was like that every day. Then Bill bought paints, brushes, canvases, and many other things again. And again he spent days looking for inspiration, which was unavailable for him. It had been like that for about 10 years. Dorothy turned off the stove and wanted to go to the refrigerator, but she stepped on a potato she hadn't noticed when she was cleaning. The woman cried out from the unexpectedness and almost fell, but kept on her feet, touching with her hand the pot with milk. Of course it crashed to the floor. Dorothy sighed deeply and once again complained about her clumsiness. By the time her husband arrived, Dorothy had cleaned up the kitchen. Bill looked a little gloomy, but when he saw the fried potatoes on the table, he got even more gloomy. "Potato? Again?" he said, without saying hello. Dorothy smirked. "What's wrong with a potato? Sorry, I didn't have time to go to the store today. There was a lot to do at the bakery. You should have gone for groceries yourself, because you knew the fridge was empty. You should have helped me instead of wandering around the city." Bill frowned resentfully and sat down at the table and muttered, "You know I don't have time for this. I'm busy with important things. I don't have time for grocery shopping at all. Do you really want me to lose my inspiration?" Dorothy raised her eyebrows in surprise and smiled. "You've finally found it, haven't you? I hadn't noticed that. I didn't think you found it today, otherwise you'd be in a good mood. I came in late yesterday and you were already in your office. You must have painted a picture. Will you show it to me today?" Bill glanced at his wife with displeasure, but instead of answering, he silently grabbed his fork and began to pick the potato. He didn't know what to say to his wife to make her go away, but then suddenly he noticed that some of the potatoes were burned, and he started to get indignant. "Oh, what kind of woman are you? Well, you can cook something edible at least one time in life. You ruin everything around you." Dorothy immediately responded to him. "And what, are you not satisfied? Well, it's burnt a little, and if you don't like it, maybe you can cook something yourself. I don't mind if you want to treat me with your self-made dinner." The prospect of cooking did not suit Bill, so he silently continued to eat, especially since the potatoes, despite a few burnt pieces, turned out tasty. Meanwhile, Dorothy washed the dishes, made herself a cup of tea, and put a plate of pancakes on the table. Breathing heavily, the woman sat down on a chair and wiped the sweat from her forehead. Yes, she had gained weight quickly lately, and now she felt that it had made her life much more difficult. Meanwhile, Bill looked at his wife sideways and thought unhappy thoughts. "Dorothy has become so unattractive. I used to be fond of her, but after all these years, she's gotten older, and she's also gained a lot of weight. A man, after a long and hard day, wants to go home into the arms of a beautiful and well-groomed woman, and I have to put up with a woman who has already forgotten what lipstick and mascara are." Bill finished his potatoes. He left a dirty plate on the table and went to his office. He didn't even thank his wife for dinner, but Dorothy was used to it. She silently finished her tea, cleaned the dirty dishes from the table, and then went into the shower. In the meantime, Bill sat in his office and thought about his life. Everything was not going the way he had dreamed of in his youth. He wanted to be a great artist, to have queues of clients lined up to him, to have orders for paintings for months ahead, to have the most beautiful women throwing themselves into his arms. But it turned out differently. All these years he tried to find his style, which would help him become a great artist, but all to no avail. He was unable to paint anything. However, Bill was still sure everything would be okay. He was still young and full of energy. He had just not found his inspiration or his muse. Bill spent about an hour handling paints, polishing brushes, and cleaning his drawers. He still hadn't started his masterpiece, and then he got bored, so he looked at his watch and decided to go to bed. Upon entering the bedroom, the man saw that his wife was already asleep, and he was very happy that she would not lecture him before he went to bed. 10 minutes later, he fell asleep too. The next morning, Dorothy got up before her husband, as usual. Already dressed, she was drinking her coffee when Bill came into the kitchen and sat down at the table with a displeased look. "Did you make me coffee?" he muttered without even saying good morning. Dorothy reached for the mug on the countertop. As she put the mug in front of her husband, a few drops fell on the tablecloth. "As usual, you can't do anything neat," grumbled Bill. Dorothy said nothing, and Bill suddenly wanted to humiliate her even more, and he said loudly, "I still wonder how people buy something from you in your bakery. Do you break and drop everything there too? Hasn't anyone complained yet?" But Dorothy said nothing to that either, and only gave an unkind look that did not promise anything good. Bill realized that his taunts were useless and shut up. He took a few sips of coffee and then took one pancake. He made a few chewing motions and suddenly started to spit it out right on the table, and then he pulled out a long hair with his hand. Looking at it, he first blushed in anger and then yelled, "Dorothy, this is disgusting! Can't you make a normal meal without your hair in the pancakes?" Dorothy listened, with her mouth open, as her husband poured out his anger on her, and only quietly said, "I'm sorry. It was accidentally. I didn't do it on purpose." Bill opened his mouth to say something, but could not get a word out of anger, and suddenly his gaze fell upon his wife's figure, and he said something that he regretted afterwards. "How did I manage to marry you? What bad luck for me. If I'd known you were going to be fat like a cow, I would never have married you." Bill said these words and became silent. There was an awful silence. Bill had never insulted his wife so much. Dorothy pressed her lips together and looked at her husband, who had allowed himself such hurtful words. She realized that she could cry from resentment, but gathering her will in a fist, quietly muttered, "So, you think that you did me a favor to marry me? Well, it's time I told you the truth, darling." Bill was looking at his wife, and suddenly he felt a little uncomfortable and realized that he didn't want to hear what she was going to say. But there was no turning back, and Dorothy continued. "You know, I loved your mother very much. She was a wonderful woman, kind, nice, and a little unhappy. And do you know what she was suffering from? A son who was nothing. She suffered a lot with you before I got caught. You think I'd marry such a bum who can't do anything or even try to learn anything? I would never agree to be your wife of my own free will. But your mother came to me. She begged me to accept your proposal, and before I could refuse, she made me an offer I couldn't refuse. She gave me a large sum of money so that I could fulfill my dream and open my own bakery. I am still amazed at her honesty and trustworthiness, because we never sealed the deal. I might not have kept the deal. Yes, I could have taken the money and then refused your proposal, but I couldn't betray your mother's trust, because I'm an honest person. If I promise something, I'll do it, no matter what it takes. And I also promised your mother, before she died, that I would never leave you, no matter what happens. You're like a child. You can't be left alone at home. You've never turned on the stove or paid the bills. Have you ever made your own coffee? That's why I'm not leaving you, because of your mother." Bill listened to Dorothy with his mouth open. He turned pale when the truth came to him. All his anger evaporated. "I have told you everything. Yes, I have promised your mother to take care of you, but I didn't make a promise that I would put up with insults and abuse. As long as you don't get on my nerves or insult me or stick your nose where you shouldn't, then you'll be under my care. But if I ever hear anything like that from you again, you'll be left with nothing. I feed you, buy clothes for you, give you money for paints, wash your clothes. I am earning money, and you haven't brought home a penny in 10 years. If you want to do everything yourself, fine. Go ahead and call me a fat cow again, and you'll be free." Bill was silent, and Dorothy smirked, satisfied. "At least I am glad that you still have a mind. That means that not everything is lost. Finish your coffee and go searching for your inspiration. Don't bother me. I've got a lot to do before I get to work." There was silence for a few minutes. Bill quickly finished his coffee. He ate a few more pancakes, giving them a quick inspection, then washed his mug, which had never happened before. As he left the house, he shut the door quietly behind him. Dorothy grinned. She got up from the table and accidentally hit it with her hip, causing the teaspoon to fall. Dorothy shook her head and said in her usual tone, "What a day it is. Everything falls out of my hands."